What does real-world success in business actually look like? Welcome to Bearcats Mean Business, the official podcast of the University of Cincinnati's Carl H. Linder College of Business, where inspiring career stories, honest lessons, and fresh business perspectives from the people building impact in the real world come together. Tune in for inspiration, practical business insights, and forward-looking thought leadership on how ambition turns into action. And now, for today's episode. Amanda, welcome. Thank you for being on Bearcats Mean Business today. Busy week for you, I know.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about your job, just like full-on job title start, antitrust lawyer. I have no idea what that really means. Can you explain that to me and to our listeners?
Sure. So I think people might know more about what an antitrust lawyer does today than they did 20 years ago when I started out in this profession. Fun story, when I told my parents that I was going to be an antitrust lawyer, they're like, well, you couldn't just be something sensible like an engineer. What does that even do? So at most basic, an antitrust lawyer is charged with helping clients enforce the federal and state antitrust laws in the U.S. And what that means at a practical level is ensuring that every company has the opportunity to compete on a level playing field. So there's going to be winners and losers. Some companies will compete better than others. Some will have better products and services. And it's really kind of, back to economic principles, supply and demand. Okay. Whoever has the best products wins. And at most basic, we help clients tell the story of how, what they're doing in their business or transactions that they are thinking about doing will ensure that that playing field stays competitive.
Okay. Thank you for the breakdown. Is this something you envisioned when you were taking business classes here at UC, or was this something that you thought of in law school?
No, I'm actually one of the few people who knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life from early on. I've been very fortunate in that area. So I decided to become an antitrust lawyer right around 1999, 2000, when I was studying economics here at UC. And there were two things happening. I was studying kind of microeconomics 101, and we were talking about supply and demand principles. We're talking about monopolization theories and kind of the basic principles that the U.S. antitrust laws are founded on. And at the same time, kind of out in the world more generally, the U.S. Department of Justice was suing Microsoft for alleged monopolization behavior. So I had a real life example as I was studying this in my textbooks of kind of how this plays out in the law. And I just became the biggest nerd and was following the Microsoft case with interest. And, my interest kind of grew from there.
Okay. Now, once you graduated and everything, you didn't necessarily take the safe route. It's something we talked about beforehand in your career. In fact, you told me that you passed on what you called a generous offer from a New York City law firm to go work for the government. Why would you do that?
My mom asked me the same question back then too. Why would you take a job that pays a third of what you could make? She, kind of cried a little bit and asked if I would ever pay off my law school loans. And I did. I did pay off my law school loans eventually in my 40s. But I took the job because I think that there's more to life than money. And especially early in your career, opportunities matter more than financial gain. And there's always time in your career to take the maybe more lucrative financial job. But if you can start your career off with great experience, that will pay dividends later in your career. So when I was coming out of law school, I had the opportunity to work at a big New York, kind of white shoe law firm, which is kind of the dream that everybody aspires to when you're in law school, or many people aspire to. But I had the opportunity also to work at the Federal Trade Commission and be a frontline antitrust enforcer. And at that point, I had been thinking about antitrust for about 5 years, my time here at UC and then in law school. And I said to myself, if I'm really going to do this, if I'm really going to be an antitrust lawyer and I want to find out what it's really like and what the day-to-day is, I've got to go all in. And so I went to the Federal Trade Commission, and it was still one of the best jobs I ever had. I had amazing experience. I wasn't stuck in a room reviewing documents for a year like many of my law school classmates who had chosen to go to law firms. This was back when you actually reviewed documents and not just on know, on computers
Sure.
or using
I'm
AI.
I'm with you, yeah.
But I had the opportunity to lead cases and stand up in court and say, you know, I'm Amanda Waite. I'm here on behalf of the U.S. government for the Federal Trade Commission, and that is a really powerful thing to say, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So my next question was going to be, walk me through like the poignant moments you remember from that, or things that you maybe carry with you to your current role from that job that clearly left an impact on you.
Yeah, I mean, I think going to the government, you know, we had small teams, and so you were kind of expected to be a lawyer from day one. You know, you didn't have a lot of time to kind of shadow people and learn how to do things. You really had to learn on the fly. So one of the most interesting moments, I think, in my early career was about a year into my practice at the Federal Trade Commission. Someone came to me and said, you know, we're staffing up a new matter. There is an issue around natural monopolization theory, and we have an economic witness on the other side, and we need to take his deposition. You have a degree in economics. Don't you want to be the expert witness to, you know, take the person who takes the economic expert's witness? And, you know, taking a deposition is hard enough. But taking the deposition of someone who testifies in court professionally as their job and has been doing so for 20 years as a professional PhD economist was very intimidating. But I just rolled up my sleeves and did it. And I think the lesson that I've taken from that is you have to give people the opportunity to reach. And you have to give people the opportunity to prove that they can do it. You can't just give people the jobs that you know that they can do. And so now that I'm more senior in my career and I'm working with junior people, you know, I'll take a hard look at what tasks are coming up, and I'll say, who have I worked on with these kinds of projects? And I won't let them do the same thing again. I'll make them do the next thing, do the biggest thing.
Intentionally expose them to other areas, to knowing that it'll help them further down the road, or and help your team and your company, I'm assuming, too.
Right. And you have to kind of stand back and let them do it, you know, and even though you know how to do it more efficiently, or you might know the slightly better question to ask, you kind of have to let people figure it out and be there as a resource for them, but, you know, give them opportunities just like I did. And I had those opportunities when I was more junior.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, I'm sure. Yeah. Let's talk about developing expertise. Your work demands, as you've mentioned, legal depth, but also industry fluency. How did you go about building that kind of cross-sector knowledge in your position?
Yeah, well, let me take a step back and just say, in antitrust, we have to learn a lot about industries. So we are advising on the competitive playing field, which looks very different from industry to industry. I do a lot of work in the healthcare sector, for example, and the way that hospitals compete to be in network with insurers is very different than how, you know, your supermarket down the street competes to get customers walking in the door. You know, those are two very different industries. I also do a lot in kind of manufacturing and manufacturing for inputs. So the customers there are not, you know, people like you and me buying engines for things, but they're usually, you know, automobile manufacturers or recreational vehicle manufacturers or other big companies that are buying things as inputs into products that they're then making and selling to others. And so again, very different competitive dynamics. And so, you know, I work in all of those industries simultaneously. And when a client calls and wants to talk about something that's happening in their industry, I have to know what's going on, not just how do you make this widget or how do you put together a network for health services, but, you know, are there any recent moves in the space? Are companies innovating? Are there new companies coming in? Did their biggest competitor just get a huge capital infusion? You have to stay on top of all of this stuff because the clients are expecting that you know their business. Yeah. So that's a bit of the background. To go to your immediate question, I think AI helps a lot with this, and it's a tool that we didn't really have even a couple years ago, where I have, for example, we use Copilot at my law firm, and I have a daily Copilot prompt that runs every morning at 6 a.m. that summarizes all of the emails that come in from different news sources in my inbox and pops out a summary. And I can go through those. It contains links to the underlying articles, and I can skim through, and I have it set up so that I'm looking at manufacturing industry publications. I'm looking at healthcare industry publications. I'm looking at tech publications. I'm looking at general news sources, but I can skim through the headlines and really stay on top of what's happening in all of those industries, so that when my clients call and say, oh, hey, did you see that so-and-so just got bought out by this other competitor of ours? I can say, yes, I did see that. What does that mean for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you touched on leadership a little bit earlier, but I want to circle back to that. What other ways do you tend to show up as a leader in your position, and how has that evolved for you over your career?
Oh, that's a great question. I think leadership means a couple different things, and I think it's helpful to think about it in different buckets. So there's, the big picture strategy leaders, the where is this business going to be in 5 years kind of questions, or the how do we innovate to stay relevant in our industry kinds of questions. And, leadership at that level requires, kind of being able to see around corners, seeing what's coming down the pike, seeing what your competitors are doing. I'm working right now in my law firm to help develop out a 5-year strategic plan for our DC office. And so we're trying to think through, what impact is AI having on our business? How many associates do we need? Do we need partners in different areas and things like that? But I also think leadership means the day-to-day stuff. And that's, I think, a little trickier, because it's, one thing to put together a strategic 5-year plan and then go out and hire in specific areas and execute on that plan. But I think the leadership on a day-to-day level is things around office culture, particularly around return to office, has been a big challenge, particularly in the DC area where post-COVID, it's really, really hard to get people physically in the building. Everybody wants to work from home. A lot of people moved further out. Commuting distances are hard. Traffic is horrible. Parking is hard. There's all kinds of reasons. And you can only throw so many pizza parties, to get people in the door.
Right.
And so as a leader in the organization, you have to have those little interactions every day. So for example, I walk the hall every morning at 10 o'clock, not to take notes or keep score who's here, who's not here, but to make the people who are there feel valued and, give them a little love that, we care about them as people, and, we care that they're in the building, and we care that they're there. We want to hear what's going on with them, and we want to hear what's going on with their families. And so I think that is another kind of soft skill form of leadership, that when you're trying to hit those big picture goals of building out an office or building out an organization or developing in certain areas, having the trust of your team and the culture around it that happens through those daily interactions is critically important to be able to execute on the bigger stuff too.
Yeah, I like that answer a lot. Those personal touches mixed with the strategic vision. Where did you pick up on that? Is that something that just comes gradually with experience, or are there specific mentors or leadership figures that you've had sort of modeled this behavior after?
I think it was just because I saw how I wanted to be treated.
Okay.
When I was more junior, I entered practicing law in the early 2000s, where after I left the Federal Trade Commission, I joined a law firm in 2007, where, and this wasn't specific to that law firm, but the culture in law generally was a lot of FaceTime and a lot of long hours. We didn't have the ability to work remotely. For client confidentiality and security reasons, we couldn't access firm networks from our homes. So that meant I had a pillow and a sleeping bag under my desk in my office, and I ordered takeout a lot for office dinners, and was in the office quite a bit. And at various organizations where I've been over time, I've seen how office leadership and office management would, interact with the people who were there kind of pulling the all-nighters or working really hard for clients. And, I saw, frankly, people with leadership titles who, would swing by your office at 7:00 at night and say, hey, I'm going out to dinner with some clients, have that thing on my desk in a couple hours, or have that thing on my desk for the morning. And then they were gone for the night. Then I saw the leaders who were like, hey, I'm really sorry that you have to be here tonight. I have this client dinner that I have to do, but I'll be back in 2 hours and let me know how I can help. And those are very different messages that come across to junior folks in organizations. And so I think that I've always seen through my own experiences, leadership as not just being the title or, the person that has the role, but leadership is how you build the culture.
Yeah, inherent to leadership and also inherent to your position are the ethical areas. How do you navigate these ethical gray areas when the stakes are so high for you in your position? And I guess what are the principles that lead you to like the quote unquote right answer when it's not so obvious?
Yeah, I mean, for lawyers, we have a lot of guidance on what is and is not ethical. And I will say the vast majority of lawyers, at least that I have interacted with over the course of my career, take ethics incredibly seriously. As part of my license for the Commonwealth of Virginia, I have to take ethics credits, continuing legal education every year. And I have to certify to the Virginia State Bar that I have done that and that I have taken these courses and that I'm staying on top of what the ethical rules are in the jurisdictions where I practice. I think aside from the technical rules, at least for the lawyers that I work with and that I've interacted with, we all take ethics incredibly seriously because our life and our livelihood is on the line. And it is just not worth it to take risks on your law license or your practice and your reputation. If you lose your law license in one jurisdiction, every other jurisdiction where you're licensed to practice will also pull your law license, and then you're out of a job, and what do? We've got mortgages to pay just like everybody else. So, I think it's something we take very seriously. Most law firms and other organizations have their own general counsels who are the lawyers for the entity, for the law firm or for the organization. And I have built great relationships with those folks over time. When there are gray areas, I will seek guidance internally. There's also bar counsel for the state bars where people are practiced that can give guidance on anonymous basis. So there's a lot of guidance out there. Now, that all said, clients do come to you and have a lot of questions. And your job as a lawyer is to assess the risk for your clients. We are not the decision makers. We're not the business people. We're not the ones that say, do this, don't, here's what you're going to do. We just advise and they make decisions. And so our job as counselors and advisors is to, sometimes ask the question, well, how do you look in orange? Do you really want to end up in jail? Because that's where this is going to go if you go down this path. Most of the work that I do is civil. So my clients, I've, knock on wood, have never had a client go to jail, at least not for anything that I was advising on.
Yeah, put that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, maybe that should be my tagline.
Yeah.
Amanda Waite, lawyer, has never sent a client to jail. I don't think my firm would like that too much.
Yeah, probably not.
But, we do have to sometimes be the bad guy in the room.
Yeah.
And clients are coming to me with big ideas that are going to transform their business that they have been thinking about for a long time. And so it's really hard sometimes to be the person who taps the brakes on that and says, maybe this isn't the best idea. Maybe this will not put you in compliance with the laws that you need to be in compliance with. But that always creates an opportunity, and it creates an opportunity to build your relationships with your clients. So going back to the question that you had earlier about staying on top of the client's business, sometimes I will go to clients and say, well, maybe you can't do it exactly this way, but here's what I saw another company doing. Would something like this work for you? Because I think there's a way that you could do it like this instead of doing it like that. And, then you are more in compliance, or here's your risk level. this is going to be higher risk, this will be lower risk, but, it's up to you what your risk tolerance is. And then as the outside lawyers, we just have to document the advice that we gave in case it goes sideways.
Yeah, instead of an outright no, options and giving them degrees of certainty, I guess.
Yeah, we try really hard not to be the department of no.
Right, yeah, as easy as that can be sometimes. Going off that, the tension and difficult conversations that I'm sure you experience with your clients on probably almost a near daily basis is really interesting to me. How do you navigate those stormy waters? Do you walk in okay, this one's gonna be a tough one. Do you have like a checklist you're coming in with make sure I do this and this with this client? How do you kind of navigate those situations?
So first, I think it's important to kind of understand the personalities. So I'm often coming in at a pretty high level in an organization. So I'm either directly advising a CEO or a chief legal officer or CFO, kind of C-suite level folks within a client, or I'm coming in and advising the board because they're making a strategic business decision that requires that level of approval. And so I think just with any professional presentation or anytime you're coming in to be an expert at that level, it's really important to understand the personalities and where people are coming from. And you don't have to come in cold. There are people in the organization who know the personalities involved. And so having a close relationship with the general counsel or the chief legal officer or the CEO or the chairman of the board or whoever is the closest contact, I think it's incredibly helpful and almost necessary to talk to them ahead of time and say, okay, tell me who's going to be in the room, who's going to like this decision that you're going to make, and more importantly, who's not going to like it, and what's their objection going to be, so that I can help anticipate that. And then I think it's important to come into the difficult conversations and just, state the elephant in the room. This is a hard choice. I know you are facing a hard choice. I have worked with clients who faced these same kinds of hard choices. I don't mean to minimize that in any way, but here's how you can navigate that. Here's how, you can make this decision and take that consideration into account, even if it's something that's not directly an antitrust related concern. So let me give you an example. Okay. I'm often working with clients who are considering large strategic mergers and acquisitions, usually in the multi-hundreds of millions of dollar range. These are big choices. Most of my clients are public companies, so these are decisions that have SEC reporting obligations attached to them. They're oftentimes decisions that are coming with job implications. So, you merge two companies together, you don't necessarily need two CFOs or two CEOs, and you've got the people in the room whose jobs might be on the line as a result of this. And so it's very a sensitive line to walk to say, you have to do what's in the best interest of the company. That's your job as an outside counsel, and that's the board's job as a fiduciary for the organization. But knowing that your decision might impact your friend who's the CEO is really tough. So I think just coming in and saying, we know this is tough. This is not going to be an easy decision, but kind of having the sideline conversation saying, look, if this deal goes through and you, CEO, are now looking for a new position, I have lots of clients that are looking for CEOs. Let me help you with that.
Right.
So there's ways you can navigate that, kind of strategically.
Yeah, a delicate dance to be sure. Mm-hmm. Has there been a case you've worked on that really changed your perspective on markets or competition or any of the various areas that you've worked on?
So in 22 years of being an antitrust lawyer, I've become a little insufferable around competition because I get the pleasure of working with clients in all different kinds of industries. And it impacts just everyday life. I look around the world and I see things that I've had the opportunities to touch upon in my antitrust life. And it's just, it's fascinating and I absolutely love it. So for example, I'm just here in this podcast room and there is a case of water sitting on the floor. I have worked on cases involving supply chain for supermarkets and big box retailers. I know exactly how that case of water probably got here. I've worked on cases involving retail food distribution. So maybe your case of water came through a food distributor instead of through a supermarket.
Yeah.
I can tell you all about that. I drive down the highway and I see my clients' distribution trucks driving down the road. And if I'm not driving, if someone else is driving the car, I will literally take pictures of semi trucks on the highway that belong to my client, and I will send them pictures and say, I saw one of your trucks today. In terms of any particular cases that are interesting, I had an opportunity pretty soon after I left the Federal Trade Commission and went into private practice to represent Delta Airlines in their merger with Northwest Airlines in 2008. And that has changed how I travel. It has changed how I think about airlines. It has changed how I think about flight scheduling. It has changed, even what I think about when I'm sitting in an airport gate waiting to board a flight. I just learned so much about how airlines work, and it is such a fascinating industry. I also could probably tell you any airport in the U.S. based on its 3-digit FAA code, still 15 years later. So you can test me out. But my favorite airport code is Sioux City, which Sioux City's airport code is SUX.
Okay. Nice. I'm sensing a future podcast from you, Amanda Wade, on airlines.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Nice. All right, last couple of questions here before I let you get on a plane. Can you give me some background on how you've been involved with the Kautz-Ubel Economics Institute, which is one of our centers institutes here at Linder and a wonderful institute, and why this institute means so much to you?
Sure. So when I was an economics student back starting in 1997, I had the opportunity to apply for a scholarship, which the institute then was called the Hewitt-Kautz Fund. And that scholarship really changed the whole course of my life. I was able, lucky, fortunate, honored to receive a 2-year financial scholarship as part of that fund, and graduated from undergrad with no student debt, which to me was incredibly important as I was thinking about law school. And it enabled me to apply to law schools outside of the Cincinnati area. I ended up going to William and Mary in Virginia. And if I had student debt from my undergraduate education, I don't think I would have been able to take on additional debt in law school and had the courage and kind of financial wherewithal to be able to move halfway across the country in a state where I had no relatives, no family, and just kind of start over there. So it was incredibly financially supportive for me. And so I was thrilled several years ago when I had the opportunity to join the board of that fund. So I've been very involved probably for 14 years or so now, and just working with Dan Kautz and Woody Ubel and Debashis Powell, and seeing their vision for the economics department, and really seeing philanthropy in action, how much good we can do as an institute to support our students, to support our alumni, to support our professors and the department. I think we've just done really great things. So maybe as an example, one of my personal projects within the Kautz-Ubel Economics Institute started about 10 years ago, where we founded what's now called the eConnect initiative, which is a loosely organized group that provides mentoring and support to current economics students. So, for example, today, here in about an hour or so, we're hosting a lunch for the economics students. We're having a couple other alumni come into town. We do this every spring and every fall to talk about careers in economics, what you can do with an econ degree, how you can be ready for your internship, how you can explain why an econ degree is actually the best degree to get and can create more opportunities for you, especially if you pair it up with another degree within the College of Business. And it can just create opportunities that not having an econ degree, won't necessarily get for you.
Right. And you remain connected to not just the Institute and here at Linder, but also all of UC through your work with the foundation. You mentioned some of the work there. You also have done guest lectures. What overall motivates you to stay engaged? I guess aside from like the personal experience that you have, but sort of expanding your view on it a little wider. What motivates you to stay engaged in that sense? And what do you hope students take away from your interactions with them?
Well, first, I love just coming on campus. There's so much energy, so much excitement, and I just feel very energized every time I come on campus. The campus looks very different today than it did when I first stepped on foot here as a student in 1997. Main Street wasn't here.
Yeah.
This beautiful building that the Linder College of Business is in wasn't here. And I just love seeing the transformation of our wonderful university into the just world-class research institution that we are today. So that itself is energizing. I love talking to students and hearing what they're doing. There's so much that the Linder students are doing these days. They're running organizations. They're entrepreneurs. They're starting their own businesses. I mean, they're so far ahead of where I was when I was a student here. It's just great to see. And then I think you asked about, inspiring students. I'll tell you a story. When I first became a Hewitt-Coutts Fellow and received the scholarship, they did a kind of meet and greet awards dinner. This was back in the old Alumni Center, which is actually physically in the same space that the Linder College of Business is today. And I remember, this is going to sound a little silly, but it was like the fanciest thing that I had ever been to in my life. There was a harpist. I remember very vividly, there was a harpist from CCM.
Maybe to bring that harpist back.
I've talked to Dan Coutts about this.
Okay. Good.
But I remember walking in and there was a harpist and everybody was just dressed so nicely and it was just a fancy event. And I had the opportunity to meet Jim Coutts, who was the original founder of the Hewitt-Coutts Fund, which he named in honor of one of his professors. And Jim, for those who don't know, he was a principal at Goldman Sachs. And I remember thinking, and I've told Dan, his son, this story too, that he had the nicest suit that I had ever seen in my life. and he just must be a really important person. But my takeaway from that is, isn't it great that somebody who has a big job and who works in New York and works for Goldman Sachs, that I had to actually look up, I didn't know what it was back then, would spend his time to come here and meet somebody like me? And it gave me the opportunity and kind of encouraged me to think big. And I don't remember exactly what we talked about during that conversation, but I remember coming away from the conversation thinking, wow, I could do a lot with my life. I could do anything. And I would love to be able to be that kind of inspiration for students here too.
Yeah, you never know the impact you can have just with like one small conversation that they can leave you with. I know that's happened for me in my own separate journey with my mentors, and it's great that you feel like you have that ability to maybe possibly be the influence for our students too.
Yeah, and it wasn't that I came away from the conversation with him, wanting to be an investment banker in New York. That wasn't what I wanted, but just the fact that we had alumni of our department who were willing to kind of show you what you could do was something that has stuck with me for now almost 30 years.
All right. Well, Amanda, that's all I have for you today. I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Bearcats Mean Business. If today's episode sparked a new idea, challenged your thinking, or helped you see your path a little more clearly, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with someone in your network. Thanks for being part of the conversation. And remember, real-world success begins here at Linder.